Your brain is not logical. Your brain, Estelle, my brain, none of our brains are logical. They aren't. God, there's so many. But yes, loss aversion. We were born of a millennia of scarcity. And so we grip tightly to what we already have because that was survival. But that is a total failure mode for the strategic conversations that we're talking about, right? We do not value time logically. We evolutionarily needed our group in order to survive. If we became ostracized from our group, we were going to die.
Hello, it's your leadership coach, Estelle Reid, and host of Optimising Leader Brilliance, the place for calm, confident, and strategic leadership. Stay tuned to the end for a mini coaching and reflective practice. Find out more about my services by heading over to estellereid.com. In today's episode, you're going to get 3 light bulb moments. First, why the number one derailer of strategy isn't a lack of intelligence or data, it's the predictable flaws baked into human decision making. Second, how your brain's evolutionary wiring, things like loss aversion, fear of being wrong, and groupthink, are secretly sabotaging your boardroom conversations. And third, how to shift your team from ego wars and endless debate to actually making decisions that stick. My guest today is Marja Fox, ex-McKinsey consultant, PhD chemist turned strategist, and founder of Marja Fox Consulting. Known as the executive team whisperer, she's guided over 100 executive teams from stuck circular conversations to decisive, confident action. She brings behavioural economics out of the textbook and into the room in a way that's practical, razor sharp, and genuinely fascinating. So, welcome, Marja. Marja
Thank you,
Fox.
Estelle.
We were just having a chat about your name, weren't we? Go on, tell the story of your name.
The story of my name, Marja,
Yeah.
Marja. It is something that came out of my parents' brains under duress. So I was originally meant to be Elisa Marie, right? Every new pending expectant set of parents has their ideas. And my parents had an idea of Lisa Marie. And then my mom's older brother had a baby a month before I was born that they named Lisa Marie. So my parents, in a fit of duress, opted instead to combine their names. My dad is Mark, M-A-R. My mom is Judy Agnes, J-A. And they shoved it together and they decided it would be Marja. So I have spent the entire last 48 years explaining people how to spell and say this name, Marja.
Yeah.
I will also add, it was the end of my parents' creativity because my younger brothers are Michael and Matthew. So that was it. They're done.
That's brilliant. But I love that as well. That is such a sweet story. So
Yes, it's a marvelous name. And let me say, I'm grateful as a small business owner. If you're going to look up Marja Fox, like you're going to find me. There's not another one.
Yeah, no, that is so unique.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I love that. So you're a strategist, a facilitator. What does your average day look like? And as part of your average day, do you have a non-negotiable routine?
Yeah, this is a great question that is harder for me to answer than you might otherwise think, because I'll tell you, part of what I love about what I do is that I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I love that I get to do work with different clients in different industries and different problems, none of which I might have anticipated becoming an expert on, right? I get to think about pizza and I get to think about wet wipes and I get to think about heart monitors so there's a lot of variety in my days by design. So my average day looks like a lot of variety. That said, I will give you a more concrete answer. I do tend to be an early riser, some of which is by choice, some of which is by being a 40-ish-year-old woman who struggles to sleep.
Yes, I know the feeling.
Yes. But up and at 'em every other week. I've got my kids, so it's the rush of getting children to wherever it is that they need to be. Then a quiet sit down. Okay, what is it that mom actually needs to do today? Which sometimes happens as late as like 9 or 9:30, right? Once those people are off in their own directions. My work day can be really varied. There's a mix of client work, but one of the things I love about being an independent is that I get to put personal stuff into there as I need it. So being independent works for me in part because I enjoy not having very solid boundaries between this is work time, this is personal time. Some people find that atrocious, right? That work then bleeds into other times. But I'm very good about sort of this is what I need to do now. And I love being the boss of deciding whether 1 p.m. on a Wednesday is my time or whether it's a client's time. I am, usually done with that part of my day by the time kids roll in. And lately, I have been spending my evenings rowing. Last year, I picked up rowing as a single lady hobby. And I love that. So, getting out on the water, I'm from Minnesota in the middle of the US. What we're known for is our 10,000 lakes. Put me near water, and everything is okay. And so getting out there, the quiet and a set of oars makes me a pretty happy person.
Wow. And so are you rowing on your own with a
Yeah.
team or?
Right now, we're mostly in a team. These boats are tremendously tippy. I did not know this. You're rowing on like a toothpick. So we do not start in singles. We start in eights, right? The more people, the better. And in fact, only half of you are ever rowing at any given time. I've advanced past that, right? But the other half is basically using their oar as like to set the boat. So now I tend to row in twos and fours. I've got a race coming up in a quad. So that's my spot these days.
Wow. And I discovered the other day, because I'm a big paddleboarder, and
Mm,
we have lots of
yes.
lakes as well in Cumbria. And I discovered that it hits all the happy hormones being on water. So, yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
it is. There's something, and this will probably tie to where this conversation goes. There is something I think that all of us think of our lives really being dictated by sort of what happened from birth to wherever we are today. And in a reality, we carry with us the entirety of human evolution. And being near water meant survival for the entire duration of humanity's evolution. And so I think our biology is wired to reward us for that. I certainly feel it. And it is, I think, just a really common thing for humans to feel peaceful and energized, to feel at home near water.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's my favorite thing. You've said some really interesting things already. So I love the fact that you're the boss of deciding. And I know, and we're going to get on to deciding in a moment, because I
Yes,
know you help teams decide, don't you, when they
I
get a
do.
block. Um, so the other thing that fascinates me about you is the variety thing and not having solid boundaries, because for some, like I'm talking about myself here, um, not having that structure, and I have quite a rigid structure and a routine. Although when I set up my business 20 years ago, you know what the evidence was for I am now an official business owner? It was having the ability to go off and have a facial in the middle of the day on a work day without taking a day's holiday. So I do, it absolutely resonates with me. But how do you cope with all of that variety and, you know, yeah.
I think part of it is really natural. So I'll try to, as I talk, I'll try to come up with some tips for people who want to embrace more of that. But I think just by admission, I think that, some of us are wired and we're wired in different ways, and that's why we need all of us. It's why, in fact, I enjoy working with groups so much, is that the kind of milieu of quirks and capabilities that we bring to the table, if we work well together, can be very, very additive. So I have always been somebody who loves new things. I'm the weirdo who can't wait for things to change. My parents moved from our childhood home when I was 7. We went from a town called Lakeville to a town called Eagan here in Minnesota. And my parents were terribly concerned about me. They were chasing, my dad's job, but they were worried about me because I'm the one who's in school. I'm a second grader. They're like, oh my gosh, she's gonna, we're like lifting her away from all of her friends. My younger brother was 4 going on 5, hadn't started kindergarten yet. They're like, he's fine. You know who was upset? Michael. Michael was upset. I was like, cool, let's go. So I just think from the beginning, I have always just sort of chased what's new. I love to be in the muck. I love to solve problems that I don't know how to solve. That drives other people bonkers, right? Like, and it's not that it didn't come with some insecurity or uncertainty, but I think certainly with a slight predisposition to that, I have then continuously put myself in situations that are muddy, that are uncertain, that do have fuzzy boundaries. And over the course of 48 years, have now proven to myself that I can do it. So there's just like kind of compounding evidence that that I enjoy that space and that I have value to add in that space. Okay, so but a little more concretely, what might somebody who isn't naturally wired like that to do? I do think one of the things is to raise your hand and sign up for the things that are uncertain. Just put yourself in that spot deliberately every now and then. None of us learn anything. None of us grow if we just keep doing what's familiar. So do it. Put yourself in that space. Don't wait until it's a massive, big, uncertain thing. Don't wait until your whole business unit needs a new strategy. How do you do it early and often? Think of it as experiments. I'm a chemist. We'll probably talk about that at some point. Like a life lived as a bunch of little experiments for you to learn from is how you build the capabilities and the comfort and get yourself into the place you want to be.
That's cool. You know what's interesting about you wonderful people that come on this podcast is the common theme is you're all really brave, you all take risks, you push your comfort zones. It just comes up again and again and again. And so I always think, yeah, it's no wonder you're a success. So, right, let's go back to this solving problems that people don't know how to solve. What's the connection with you growing up so we get a flavor of who you are as a person? Where does this working with groups, solving problems, what are the connections with your past?
Yeah. How the heck did I get here? I'm telling you, my dear friends ask me the same question. It's probably no surprise, given what we just talked about, that I have had a meandering journey to get here. There was nothing linear about it. Although in hindsight, as always, it becomes a little bit easier to draw out the threads. So as a kid, I love to explore. I love to try new things. I had a father who was very into do it yourself. Literally, my parents built our 2 homes and I was out there pounding nails, not well, but like dad would, kind of pre-pound some in. I would come behind him and like What took him one swing would take me 32. And then when I wasn't looking, he'd go back and pound him in the last little bit. But, just this empowerment around whatever it is, like you can figure it out and you probably can figure it out better than most people. And pretty academically inclined. So high school was me as the big fish in the little pond. And then when college rolled around, I didn't really know exactly what I want to be. And frankly, I still don't. I think one of the common themes is anytime I'm in a situation where somebody's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Whether that's as a kindergartner, like I literally remember sitting in class having the art assignment of drawing yourself in the future and like looking at my neighbor's papers and being like, astronaut, like newscast, okay, and just copying because like I don't know. All the way to like being at McKinsey and sitting in professional development events where they're like, find your passion. And I'm like, this is not helpful. This is so stressful.
Can you do a little thing to help me out? And that's to simply hit subscribe or the follow button now, wherever it is that you're listening. So that's maybe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, because that will help the podcast get found by other people. And that then enables us to keep going because we continue to keep growing. What would be 5-star amazing though, is if you could also leave a review. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
So I'm the person who doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up. And confronted then with kind of a first material, weighty adult choice of what are you going to major in, I kind of fell into, well, what's the hardest thing I can do? Because that's what's interesting. And what was hard in high school was the sciences. Okay, so I'm going to go off and be a scientist because I like hard things. And did that for 4 years as an undergrad, did it for another 5 getting my PhD, solving the hard problems. And I do like to solve hard problems. I sort of chased that. But midway through my PhD, as I'm sitting in a laser lab all by myself at 3 a.m., trying to keep the stupid machine working, I was like, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this. This is not good. And it was traumatic. Right? I was just like, I've just thrown away a decade of my life. Um, and so the next step was after much turmoil, I went to McKinsey. I went to be a management consultant. So, according to all of my academic peers, I was committing a cardinal sin. You go off into academia, you go do a postdoc, like you become a professor. You do not go into business. I sold my soul to but consulting promised a variety of experiences, right? Consulting promised that I could go try 100 different things and I could try them for a confined amount of time. 2 months, 3 months, like drop in, get out. It seemed to me the perfect place for somebody who doesn't know what they want to be when they grow up. Um, and I thought errantly that through that I would figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And that turned out not to be the case. But it did fulfill a whole bunch of other things. Now I learned to solve problems in a different environment. And they were hard for different reasons. They were hard for lack of information. They were hard, eventually, I came to understand, in part because of people. Well, the thing that we want to talk about, right? But just, and not because, I mean, some people are bad, but most people are not bad. And most people are not dumb. It's hard because of our humanity, but it is also exhilarating because of our humanity. So, this sort of, I love to understand how atoms work. I love to understand how businesses work. And I love to understand how people work started being threads that wove together.
Nice.
And
But again, there is also another common theme here in that, so you can drop in and you can go out. So that's the variety piece, isn't it? But again, I'm intrigued about you go for the hardest thing I can do. What does that get for you? What does it do for you?
Yeah. There is just nothing better than standing at the end of having solved a problem you had no idea how to solve at the beginning. And I think I chase that. I have such extraordinary pride just in every part of my body at looking back and being like, we had no idea. And look what we did. Look what we figured out. Um, it's also deep confession. Another thread here is I'm terribly lazy. Uh, and what I
I
mean by that
don't.
is I love to solve hard things in the simplest possible way.
Yeah.
Um, I remember, all the way back to high school again, um, physics class. I think we were on like a sound unit, and I had been sick. I'd been out for like a week, and I came back and sat down in my desk, and Mr. Brandt like started walking around. He's like, the test is today, and handing out the test. And he got to me and he kind of paused, and I was like, I'll take it. And my desk neighbor looked at me just like, what are you doing? Like he was just going to give you more time. Like, what are you doing? I was like, I'll take it. A couple days later, when he turned the test back, he announced that I had high scored the test. And I tell you, like, more than any other thing that ever happened to me in high school, like, that is a memory that is just deeply entrenched in my brain. I chase that, right? I solved the hard thing and I did it the easiest and dumbest way possible. That is my hit. And I
That you've
chase it.
given me chills because, I love the fact that, out of these single experiences that we have as kids, that we can then create a whole career. And even, you said you'd thrown away a whole decade being a chemist. My husband's a chemist. He's a great problem solver as well. And you can't my immediate thought was, I bet you didn't throw a whole decade away. I bet you learned some amazing skills as a chemist. The whole
Yes.
because you are solving problems, aren't you, when you
Yes, you are absolutely right. There's nothing in my life that I actually threw away. It
yeah.
felt that way in the middle of it, and I think it often does for people when you're in the middle of it. And even things that you um, don't think of as throwing away, but maybe you think of as hobbies or ancillary experiences. Those sometimes come back in surprising ways. Like one of the things we haven't talked about yet is in high school, I was a theater junkie. Like musicals were my jam. I never thought of that as anything other than the fun, kind of social, non-academic outlet. And now here I am as a facilitator standing in front of audiences, managing energy, reading a room, entertaining when I need to, making them be very serious when I need to, right? So all of these pieces, including chemistry, that felt very disparate and disconnected. And maybe I liked them for individual reasons. Maybe I just stumbled into them, have over the course of my life found the ways to weave themselves together. And and I know I'm going in the right direction for myself personally because I can feel that flow state, that like I am bringing all of these pieces of myself to bear in a way that feels like I'm in the right spot. I'm doing the things I was meant to do. And oh, by the way, as a business owner, it makes me a business of one. It's terribly brilliant strategy, right? To be the like, I am literally the only person who looks like this and has this background. So of course you need me to do this, right? It's fulfilling it's deeply fulfilling on a personal level, and it's good business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I can't help but be swept along by your energy and enthusiasm. It's
That's the
brilliant.
theater.
So, yay! So, right. So, how do you get into, or what are the sorts of problems that you are helping clients solve? What are those challenges? And
Yeah.
also, then how do you do that?
Yeah. So, about half the time, the problem that they're solving is literally I need a strategy for my business. And maybe that's because the calendar says it's time to, maybe they got pushed by the board to do it. Maybe it's something significant happened in the marketplace that they know they need to react to. But half the time they're going into it with really like, my business needs a strategy and I need a strategy expert to help me do that. I don't want to hire McKinsey for $3 million, or I can't. But how do I get some help that is more sensible for me? The other half of the time, the questions are very strategic, but they're not necessarily recognized as I need a strategy. So it's questions that a client is struggling with. Usually they've tried to answer it by themselves, and they either don't know how, or they think they've made a decision but it just doesn't kind of stick, right? Like they keep coming back to it, or like people aren't really knowing how to go do it. Like it's just something's off. But what you tend to find in common with people in that tranche is those questions do inherently have strategy to them, and the reason is, or how I think about it is, they are questions that have some inherent uncertainty to them. No amount of analysis is ever going to concretely tell you what it is you need to do, which is very typical of strategy, right? Because it's forward looking. And like there's a crystal ball, nobody owns the crystal ball, so there's just this uncertainty. And then the second thing that they tend to have in common is that no single individual can or should really make that decision. And that sort of requires group involvement. And while there are a ton of advantages to group involvement, there are also a whole set of new complexities that come into play when you need to involve a group. And so between those two things, that sort of inherent uncertainty and just the messy dynamics of team decision making, people find their way to me. So those are kind of the two big tranches of folks who are like, I need a Marja.
Brilliant. So, and it's interesting, isn't it? How what you've just said there is that they think they've made a decision, but it doesn't stick. And I know personally in my own business, I even have to write my decisions down sometimes because I keep revisiting something and I think, no, and I have a little journal and there's a section called decisions made so that I don't keep picking at something. And like, for example, one of the things was even over my podcast name. I relaunched it last year, and actually I just needed to sit with the decision longer and to try it on for size and then to relax into it. And so, what kinds of decisions do businesses get stuck with?
Mhm. At the top level, it is these decisions about, in a forward looking kind of way, who do I want to be? What do I stand for? What kind of business is this? How do I win? Right? Like, what is it? And I'll tell you that it is actually not the direct answer to those that's so hard. It's the implications for what you are not that is so difficult, right? Um,
It,
it is the fear of being wrong and saying no to the wrong thing that is implicit in saying yes to another thing that really, really is difficult. It is hard to, as a business owner or as a business leader, to let what seems to be opportunities go by. And, potentially especially for the size of organizations that I serve, sort of in this middle range, right? Like I served Fortune 500s at McKinsey. I do not do that anymore. They got their whole thing going on. I don't really serve many startups either. Think about that as like sort of really small, really experimental, often still in a place where they don't have true team decision making. Like the strategy is in the like mind of a founder. It's in this middle space where what made you successful as a very small business was a single person deciding and experimentation, saying yes to a lot of things. Like that's what new business owners do, right? Like, well, let's try that. Does that fit? Let's try. And it's actually a very healthy part of beginning your business. But you come to a place where the next phase of growth requires you to choose some things and to buy, like implicitly, which I often make explicit, choose against some other things and then hold to it. And that's just a really, really difficult thing for us to do as humans.
What makes it difficult, do you think?
Mhm.
And and how do egos get involved, all that sort of thing?
Yes,
Because this thing about people don't want to be wrong, and it's one of the saboteur patterns that goes on
yeah,
because we end up doing nothing, don't we, for fear of being wrong, and we
absolutely.
procrastinate. So tell us all about that.
Yes. Gosh, that's a whole topic on its own, right? And we've alluded to some of this, right? So it comes down to both your lived history and your biological evolutionary history conspiring to make it so your brain is not logical. Your brain, Estelle, my brain, none of our brains are logical. They aren't. Now, I am not an expert in, let's call it the kind of lived psychology part of that. There are a lot of people who are. And as I've gotten to know a little bit about what you do, Estelle, I think you spend, some good amount of time in that sort of how does our childhood, how do our experiences like actually inform both what's great about us and where our limitations are. That certainly shows it up in the room when I'm there. I spend less time thinking about that and how to help individuals. That kind of sounds awful, but that's my expertise sits more on the how our brains are shaped in unhelpful ways by our evolutionary history. And so the things that you're talking about here, right? God, there's so many, but yes, loss aversion, right? We were, born of a millennia of scarcity. And so we grip tightly to what we already have because that was survival. But that is a total failure mode for the strategic conversations that we're talking about, right? You're trying to hold on to what you have instead of being able to reach for what you don't have yet. And our brains do not logically balance that.
So what
Risk
kinds of,
aversion. Yeah.
sorry, just to
Yeah.
clarify, so what kinds of things might businesses hold on to?
Yeah. Um, they'd hold on to a customer, for example, a product, a service, right? This is who we are. We're serving these legacy customers. They're not the right customers for us anymore. Maybe they actually belong with a competitor, right? Who we are, what we want to be, where our highest potential lives is over here. And we might literally have to fire customers in order to get to that place. And even one feels terrible. And even when logically you know that this direction gets you 100 new customers at better margins, your brain is still going to tell you that the one customer cannot be let go.
I totally see this actually, but I just hadn't realized or connected the dots about this fear of letting things go. And I remember years ago, this was when I was working face to face with groups, and it was a family run business, and the children had taken it over, and their parents had run the business very successfully. And they had this one product. It wasn't very prestigious, but the margins were cool on it, really, really good margins. But they were interested in this other product over here because they wanted to be different also to the parents, but there was no money in it. So actually, when we did the strategic stuff, and they looked at the numbers, they were like, actually, we maybe need to let go of this shiny thing over here, which has no money in it, and stabilize our business and continue with this product over here. So is that the kind of thing?
Absolutely. You see it everywhere. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? These sort of decision-making biases that we all have factor in massively. I mean, they factor in everywhere in our life, but they factor in massively in strategic choices. Another really, like, I think another really clear one is the failure our brains have in thinking about time. We do not value time logically. They've done experiments where they take a test subject, give them a candy bar, and say, you can eat that candy bar in a week, or I can buy it back from you. Okay. And now, of course, those test subjects are going to give you a whole different range of prices. Somebody's going to say, I don't really like candy bars. You can have it for 50 cents. Somebody's like, oh my God, I love candy bars. You're going to have to pay me $1,000 to have this candy bar. Right. But across the board, what they've essentially done is put a value of having that candy bar for a week in a monetary frame. If you ask that same group of people that I'm going to give you a candy bar in a year from now, and you can eat it in a year plus a week, or you can sell it back to me in a year, those numbers should be exactly the same. If the value of that week in that candy bar was $1,000 to you now, it should be $1,000 to you next year. But it isn't. It isn't. We think of next year and next year plus 1 week as essentially the same. But today and a week from now is very, very different in our brains. And it all comes about because as our human biology was being formed, there was a pretty damn good chance we weren't going to be alive a year from now. So year or year plus week is kind of the same to us in terms of our survival. But
Wow.
food now versus food in a week, very different thing. So our
That is
brains were,
fascinating.
yes, right? So our brains were doing the right thing for us then.
Yeah.
But now, as we try to make a strategic decision that is, something that happens off in the distance, we are massively encumbered by our inability to value time in a logical way. And of course, strategy is like all about that. You're
Of
about making decisions
course.
that happen in the future. So what do you do about that? Yeah.
What other decision-making biases are there?
Oh my
This
God,
is
there's a
fascinating.
whole host of them. If you want, there's a whole field of behavioral economics, which is won Nobel Prizes over the last probably 2 decades, which is really just about breaking apart the ways that humans do not make good decisions. We make them predictably poorly.
Brilliant.
Now, of course, not in all areas, right? But the things that come about are like strategy tends to exacerbate them. So, another bad one, that is super relevant to what we're talking about here are kind of group think, social cohesion, decision-making biases, right? We evolutionarily needed our group in order to survive. If we became ostracized from our group, we were going to die. Okay, so now we're sitting in a conference room with a bunch of our executive peers trying to have a good debate about strategy. And we know that we need the debate. We know it intellectually, but we can't have it because we're so afraid of being ostracized, which isn't going to actually happen.
Yes. Yeah. And also I am always blown away by that one person that is brave enough to speak up
Yeah.
in those moments,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they don't realize you don't realize necessarily how much bravery it takes. But also, this is where you can also play some of the work we do has to be to combat these decision-making biases. Some of them is using the decision-making biases to your advantage, right? So if you do have somebody who's willing to speak up, the power of that role modeling in getting everyone else to get on board is something you can use in order to help a group have the conversation they need to have. So it's actually got some double edges to it.
Yeah, sure. So, in your role as facilitator, how do you use all of this stuff to help businesses reach decisions?
Yes, so we've hinted at some of like being aware of it all is foundational to how I design a conversation. And as we've just said, some of the value in a group being involved in a decision is the way it can be used to combat individual decision-making biases. Right? So just the diversity of perspective is automatically, not automatically, if done well, can help us overcome our individual biases. So there's work individuals can do to kind of recognize their own and like become better leaders and great. The I don't do that part.
Fancy a chat? Or maybe you're interested in the Optimized Leader Program Next Level. You can book a free 15-minute call. See the link on screen or in my show notes.
I'm doing the part that says, as a group, can we help each other get past those things? And how do we design a conversation that allows that? So, on a practical level, I spend time individually with every person. And what we're talking about is the hard part of the problem, the what's going on in the business, what's getting in the way, what do you see in the market? At least, superficially, that looks like what the conversation is about. But I am also seeing, where are people stuck? What are they afraid of? Where does their pride or their ego show up? Where are they having trouble, listening? Where does it seem like they might just be going with the flow? So I am getting a whole bunch of information about the problem itself and about all this other stuff that sits under the problem in those kind of early set of interviews. From there, I will certainly apply kind of the good, classic strategic thinking. Here's how you think about things. Here are the frameworks. Here's the analysis, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot there, but, as well as what is the nature of the conversation that this team needs to have? And I start designing the session, whether it's a half day or 2 days, 2.5 days, design it. And by design, what's really different or special is that you take it well beyond the agenda. Like, I think at this point, everybody knows to have a good meeting, you need an agenda. You need some objectives, you need a sequence of the conversation, you need some times, right? Everybody stops there. Stopping there is not going to get you at these decision-making biases. So this is where you start, or I will start layering in the kinds of techniques that are helpful. Where do we need to do some kind of exercise that's going to open up our creative brains? We're going to draw. We're going to, I'm sure you've all sat in a session where a facilitator gives you Legos. It's not just to play, right? It's to make your brain work differently. It's to jar the system so that you can have a chance of getting out of the habits that got you there. Where do we need pair work, right? Where do I actually need to force people to role play a perspective different than theirs? Where do I literally ask them to give me wrong answers? And I will do that where we're so afraid of being wrong. I will ask a team to let's say look at a customer analysis, making up. We're looking at some analysis that's relevant to the strategy, and I tell them to fill up my flip chart with all of the possible explanations for that analysis. And of course, they're going to come up with their first one easily because that's the one everybody thinks it is. Well, look at all this white space. You better fill it up. It doesn't even have to be right? Like just fill it up, and things get released, right? When I'm deliberate in helping them get past a fear, get past a risk, forcing them to think about, like the task becomes thinking about it differently. So I
And,
call that format, but you're turning your agenda into the actual ways that you're going to have a conversation.
and what would you've mentioned fear quite a bit. So what are the typical fears that
Yeah.
you,
Fear of looking silly in front of your colleagues, fear of being wrong, fear of making a decision that is going to impact 100 employees, 1,000 employees. Like these are not unjustified fears. And I have a lot of respect for the people that I'm working with, that the fears, even the ones that are biological and don't make sense, did make sense at some point. And there are also a host of fears that are real. You're holding, as a leader, you are holding people's livelihoods in your hands.
Hmm.
And that is scary. And you should feel the weight of that if you're a responsible leader.
Yeah, of course.
But the trick is that, or that like what I'm trying to help them with is it is also scary to do nothing. It is scary to not advance your business because of the same 1,000 people that you're worried about. So
Yeah,
the
that's so
doing
true.
nothing option isn't actually solving your fear.
Yeah, that's such a great reframe. So thinking in practical terms, so if some business out there, leaders, they've got, obviously they can come to you, but if they've got a decision war going on or that they're
Yeah.
procrastinating, what would be three actionable things that you could recommend that people do?
Yeah, three things. All right. You didn't even just ask me one. You like this woman, all you listeners, she really pulls it out of her guests. Okay. First one. Um, if you are facing a challenge like this, you're not really, so there's some sort of decision to be made. Maybe you even think you sort of made it. One of the practical things you can do is have your whole team write down what they think the answer is. Do it on their own. Do it in a, confidential way. And not that I don't mean confidential, but like secret, right? Like not exposure, anonymous. There you go. That's a better word. Anonymous,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, capture all of that. Take a look at it. Talk about it at your next meeting because I bet you'll find some things that are surprising in there, in the things that people do see consistently and the things that people don't see consistently. And you might be able to already break the big problem you're facing into something smaller because some of you see things the same way. Um, that's one thing. A second thing that you can do as you're facing a difficult decision, deliberately separate that into the hard part of the problem and the soft part of the problem. So here's my problem. I think most leaders have a bias towards the hard part of the problem. What analysis do I need? What do I really know? What's the information? Supplement that with here are the people on my team. Here are the decision makers. And what do I really know about them? Not like their title, not that like, but what do I really know about them as humans and how they might think about this problem, what it means for them, their families, themselves. That stakeholder analysis is invaluable. And it doesn't even have to take long. It can take 10 minutes. Third thing, I'm going to cheat a little bit and say third thing is a follow up to that. When you, if there's two lines on there that you don't really know the answer to, go have a conversation. A human conversation
Yeah.
with the, with the intention of, with curiosity. Where is this person and why are they there? Not to further your agenda, not to advance the thinking on the hard part of the problem, but to just get under the hood a little bit on what is the human stuff going on here. Both that can help us as a team get to a decision, but also the things that might need to be helped.
Yes. Yeah. And that reminds me, well, two things. One, in the coaching world, we talk about second positioning someone. So, in order to understand another person's point of view or problem, we actually go and sit and become like them. So we take on their
Mm.
physiology. It helps us to have empathy, but it also helps us to access their filters and their thinking process.
Mhm.
So, and you're right, you can do it really quickly, can't you? You process information so quickly, it's probably already in there. And
Mhm.
then the second thing is this thing to do with curiosity, rather than going, oh, we've got a problem and, we've got to solve it, and that all feels a bit scary. Adopting a curious mindset can help solve so many things, can't it? So that is such great advice. Thank you so much. So the tradition on the podcast is for the previous guest to leave the future guest a question. So I'm going to ask you Lawrence Armstrong's question first, and then I'm going to ask you what you would like to leave the future guest. So Lawrence Armstrong, artist, architect, New York Times best-selling author of Layered Leadership. And he said, because he is in the process of selling his business off, and he was talking about the importance of having a number two or someone. And he said, not just in a business, but it can also be in life.
Mhm.
So he wants to know, who's your number two? It's as straightforward as that.
How come straightforward questions are sometimes the most difficult?
Yes.
I'm gonna take the variation that Lawrence has offered us because I don't intend to sell this business. I don't intend for it to live on past me. I am the business, right? So
Yeah.
when I think about who my number two is, it's not necessarily who's my successor, but who whose perspective do I value the most? Who can help me see the things that I don't see? And I
Mm.
will trust them as much as I trust myself. And there are two, I'm such a cheat. There are two girlfriends I have, one from college, one from McKinsey, who are the people who will always tell me what it is that I need to hear. And they will
Nice.
do it without fear. They will not be bamboozled by my big personality and my self assurance. They are not afraid. And they can always do it in a way that I can hear, which is truly a gift, isn't it? We
Yeah.
can, any one of us can sit down and smack somebody in the face if we want to. That part isn't hard. The hard part is doing it in a way that it can be received. And these two ladies are the greatest gift in my life in helping me be the biggest, baddest woman I can be. Those are my number
Ah, I
twos.
love it. I love it. And so, what question would you like to leave future guest?
Yes, what I am dying to hear from your next guest, and I think it's very part and parcel to what we've talked about, is what strange, surprising part of their past are they bringing into their world today that nobody really knows about?
I love that. That's great. I have learned so much. I was saying to my husband before I came on to record this episode that I think you're all amazing, the guests. I learned so much from you. I've learned about decision-making biases. That has really opened my eyes, and I want to go off and do a bit more research on that. Is there any reading material that you can recommend?
Oh, so many, so many. There have been some quite popular books written by behavioral economists,
Yeah.
words, economists.
Yeah.
Dan Ariely wrote some books. You can look up for him. Nudge. There's some pretty great ones out there to take a look at, and it is fascinating, and you will recognize yourself in all of these things. And I think they also they offer a lot of forgiveness, right? We beat ourselves up about our decision making, and to know that a lot of it is it's just grown into us. Like we don't have a choice. The choice we do have is to continue to march forward pretending that we are purely logical creatures, or to actually open your eyes and recognize that I'm not, and I need other people to help me. And I need to put people around me who see things differently than I do, not because I'm checking a box on meeting diversity standards, but because it is critical to the success of my business and to me in order to do so.
And that really does require you to set your ego aside, doesn't it?
That's it. That's at the center of it.
Yeah.
If you're gonna let your ego drive you, it will only get you so far.
Yeah. That has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your conversation. As I say, I've learned so much, and I know the listeners will appreciate it.
Thank you for having it. It was a joy.
Ah, pleasure. Before we sign off, I'd like to invite you to my quick reflective practice called Pause, Reflect, Act. As your leadership coach, I'm here to help you translate today's insights into personal growth and your next steps. Answer the prompts that follow in your journal or notes. Alternatively, you can access my complimentary journal and self-coaching tool in the show notes, or head over to estellereid.com. So here's today's coaching questions, which are based on Marja Fox's episode. Number 1, think of a decision your team has been circling for a while. What's really keeping it stuck? Lack of information or something more human? What would it take to move it forward? Number 2, where in your business are you holding on to something, a customer, a product, a way of working, out of a habit or fear of loss, rather than because it's truly serving your future? Number 3, in your last important group discussion, did you say everything you actually thought, or did you hold something back? And what stopped you? And what might have changed if you'd said it? If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereid.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimising Leader Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.